O que é aquele t-shirt? Está-me ali a fazer t-shirt, está-me ali a fazer t-shirt.
Volta a desligar a tua reunião, se já for a fila.
Good morning. Welcome to Fórum Lisboa. We are about to start the International Conference, Social Housing and the Recovery Plans, Pathways to Solutions. Please make sure your phone won't ring during the sessions. We'll have a coffee break at 11 a.m. and the works will start at 11:30. Please welcome from Jabarish Municipal Enterprise, João Carvalhosa, our host.
Hello, good morning to you all. Well, welcome to Lisbon and to our international conference. We will have at least a day and a half of work. We are starting today with some presentations. Tomorrow morning we will have a technical visit to one of the new buildings that were built by the municipality of Lisbon. And we will end it maybe at lunchtime. Why do I say maybe? Well, because you know that we are still living COVID experience. We are still living strikes and things like that. So one of the speakers from tomorrow morning got COVID, so he couldn't travel today to Lisbon. But we have one of his colleagues that may do it in the afternoon, so maybe we'll shrink the session tomorrow. So, but let's start the best way. I would like to invite the Lisbon Councillor Filipa Roseta to talk about the Lisbon experience with the resilience plan. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect, because I will take to walk as I speak. So hello everyone, welcome to Lisbon, e vocês todos os que são da Câmara, olá, bom dia. This is going to be in English so that we can all really follow the conversation. Do you have my presentation here? Can I please put my presentation? So let's dive right into this. First, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I especially want to thank João Carvalhosa for this amazing effort to put this together, because we really, really wanted to discuss this with you. And we really wanted to discuss this at this time. We have a huge challenge in our hands, and it's Lisbon, and it's every city in Portugal that's sharing this challenge to build housing with the recovery plan. We have a huge, huge challenge, and I'm going to try to show you our challenge and how we plan to get it done. So, this, just diving right into the numbers, this is what we have agreed to do. And I want to give you a very, very detailed perspective of this. So, Portugal has defined that we're going to build 26,000 houses, and the resilience plan is going to pay for 1 billion, so 1.000 milhões, for this recovery plan, for the housing that we want to build. Lisbon is going to build 4,479 houses, and it's going to invest 500 billion. So that's the numbers that we have in our hands. And this is the numbers that we need to work with. 500 milhões, 500 million, yes. You have the numbers in front of you and you can tell. So we need to do this until 2026. And this is the challenge. This is why we're here today. And this is why we want to keep talking to you throughout the next year. Because the next year is going to be the most important year to make sure that we can get this done. And we need to get this done. And we want to get this done. And we're going to need everybody, every idea, every technical idea, every political idea, all the cooperation that we can have to get this done. We want to get this done. So, just for you to have a perspective of the past, the first agreement was signed in 2019 before the resilience plan, and the City Hall built from 2019 to today 1,000 houses, and they're mostly in progress. And more or less in the same time, we need to do 3,464. So just compare the numbers and look at our challenge and try to think of the difficult challenges that we have ahead. Let me just, we have about 2,000 new dwellings and 1,400 new dwellings and 2,000 for rehabilitation. But I want to give you some perspective of the history for you to understand the dimension of these numbers. Go forward. So people are telling us, you need to build 3,000 houses in 3 years. What does this mean? To understand what this means, we had to look back at the numbers of the past and try to understand the challenge that we have in our hands. In the past, if we have a yearly average of the past, we have a history of the city of Lisbon. So the city of Lisbon, from the 20s in the past century, has built per year, this is an average per year, at the most 1,000 houses per year. And this is the number of houses that we need to be doing, 1,000 houses per year. So we need to meet the best year of the city in the past century. This is the challenge that we have in our hands, if you look at the history. So the question is, you see the challenge, you see the problem, but now I'm going to give you some bit of very good news that kind of helps me to stand here with a smile and have absolutely confidence that we can get this done. Even if it is the best, we need to be at the very best, of the very best of the city. Why? Why do I know that we're going to get this done? Because the people that work in the City Hall, architects, engineers, have been here since these years. So my team, I'm an elected official, and I've only been here for 1 year, yes? So I'm just, it's like a relay race. I'm going to be here for 4 years. I'm going to leave again. I'm going to pass the baton to somebody else. But the technical services of the City Hall have been here for 30 years. So I'm working with the people that have done the best of the city, that have done the best here in the city. Agora vou trazer bocadinho em português, que eu estou a ver que há muita gente aqui da Câmara, para perceberem isto, que eu acho que isto é muito importante. Porque é que eu acredito que nós vamos conseguir fazer isto? Porque é que eu acredito que nós vamos conseguir estar a produzir tantas casas como o melhor ano que a cidade alguma vez já produziu nos últimos 10 anos? Porque é que eu acredito, nos últimos séculos, não é nos últimos 10 anos, nos últimos séculos. Porque é que eu acredito nisto? A nossa média anual nos próximos 3 anos tem que ser igual à média anual do melhor ano do último século. Porque é que eu acredito que nós vamos conseguir fazer isto? Porque a equipa que fez essa melhor média anual ainda está cá na Câmara. É a mesma gente, é a mesma equipa. Portanto, eu tenho que acreditar que se eles conseguiram fazer isto, vão conseguir fazer isto outra vez. Nós estamos aqui, lá está, os eleitos, os políticos, isso é uma coisa de estafetas, nós passamos, não é? De 4 em 4 anos, muda. Mas os serviços da Câmara estão cá há mais de 3 décadas. A maior parte dos serviços da Câmara está cá desde o PER. Isto é a história de Lisboa e os programas de habitação, vocês estão a ver ali embaixo. Eles fizeram isto. Portanto, se eles fizeram isto, tenho toda a confiança que vão voltar a fazer. E, portanto, é com esta ânimo e com esta animação que eu entro neste ano, que vai ter que ser o melhor ano do último século na produção de habitação. Assim. Sorry for jumping into Portuguese. Present practice. So I'm I'm wondering, I'm looking around, falo em português ou em inglês? Fico na dúvida. Inglês, okay, so I'm going to be English, okay. So I'm going to show you some of the things that they've done already. Yes, this is one of the buildings that the City Hall has produced. I'm not quite sure if you're going to visit this one, but it has been awarded an award for the best architectural practice. It was a competition. This was chosen by the population itself. So this is one of the buildings that have been done, and it's the rehabilitation of an entire neighborhood, and we plan and we aim and we want to finish this neighborhood with the resilience plan. It's a rehabilitation of a social neighborhood, and actually I'm going to have to leave for a bit to go to one of these meetings in this neighborhood, so that's going to be some of the challenges. Another one, Bad Cruz, once again, always the same team. The services of the City Hall. This one I like really a lot, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it's the rehabilitation of a modernist building. So the City Hall bought one of these huge modernist buildings. There was a modernist plan from the 50s, 60s, and there was services, so it had lost the housing function. So it changed again to housing, and they rehabilitated the entire building to become housing again. And now this is a very interesting practice, and this is done by our Manela Billy, which I suspect, the architect that I suspect, is doing more houses than anybody in Europe, I might say, contributing to this resilience plan, building a lot of houses, and this is one of the buildings that I think is going to be finished soon, so this is going to be a good part. Rehabilitation of existing buildings of the City Hall. So we have another project that I love from this team that I'm telling you that has been here for 3 decades, rehabilitating the courtyards and the villas. So the City Hall has a lot of old buildings falling apart in the city, yeah? So, and some of these are old patios, courtyards. I'm not quite sure how you translate this into English. These courtyards are being rehabilitated by the City Hall and by this team with the people inside. And I think this is just extraordinarily beautiful. Imagine doing a construction work. You have, a building where you have to rehabilitate the building, rebuild the building, refurbish the building, and moving with the people inside. So they're not going to go anywhere. Most of them are very old people. They're as old as the building. So you need to do all the construction with the people inside. So you go to these sites and you usually find an old lady in her robe walking around the construction site and complaining about something. So imagine this. I love this program, and I really want to share to you my passion for this program because I think it's a very extraordinary one, and we're going to keep on doing it more. So it's taking all these very old houses that the City Hall has with very old people inside. Of this one, this is 35 houses, and I think of the 35 houses, you have about half of these with people and half of them empty. And imagine doing the construction, rehabilitating the entire work, the entire building with the people inside, moving them around so that you can actually get this done. So I think this is actually a new idea in architectural theoretical approach in a way that you rehabilitate not only the physical heritage of the city, but also the social heritage of the city at the same time. So we're really assuming that the city has a double heritage that you need to rehabilitate at the same time. And this is something new in architectural history and architectural theory. This is something new. I'm also an architect and a professor of the university, so you might see this sliding in at a very frequent time. And I think this program I want to share my enthusiasm with you for this program because I think this is really quite unique. I haven't seen this, really. And if you know this, show me, because I haven't seen this around in Europe. I haven't seen a lot of people doing this. Rehabilitating the building with the people inside. And at the end of the operation, you have a new building and the same old people living in amazing conditions after all this, with new people in the mix. So it also has a social mix in the end. So I think I'm going to be promoting this a lot throughout Europe, and I do challenge any European city to show me if they've done this before, because I haven't seen it, and I want to see it if you've done it before. Okay, some recent projects. So So we have this work that has been done by the City Hall with these architects and engineers that have been here from the 90s. So for 30 years, we have an amazing team. It gives me all the confidence that we can get this done. But we also want to challenge new ideas and new projects and a new philosophy for the city. So we embrace and welcome this vision that Ursula von der Leyen said when she gave us the resilience plan, when she announced the resilience plan. She said, I'm going to give you this, but don't build the cities like they were used to be. Don't do it exactly like they used to be. Let's try to reimagine the world. Let's try to reinvent the city in a way that's more beautiful, inclusive, and sustainable. Let's try to reinvent the new European Bauhaus. Of course, as an architect, completely excited that the president of the commission is talking about an architectural school. It's absolutely amazing. But so we designed in Lisbon, in the City Hall, this line of competitions that has the title, Lisbon Imagining the New European Bauhaus. So we're launching a lot of new competitions for architects for our empty sites and asking the architects to tell us, what do you think the new European Bauhaus can be? So how do you imagine the city? What kind of city can Lisbon be if it becomes more beautiful, sustainable, and inclusive? So we've launched 2 competitions by now. These are the results. These are the results. One of them, Quinta do Ferro, Bairro do Armador, and we have the other one coming, hopefully this week. I don't know where Margarita is, but hopefully this week. It's always, which is for a cooperative housing movement. So we're going to have a new line of housing that wants to be within the theoretical vision for the new European Bauhaus, a city that's going to be more beautiful, sustainable, inclusive. And we're really excited to see this. So we're taking all the advantage of the history of the City Hall, of all the experience that the City Hall has provided to the city throughout the decades, and we're going to add it and mix in a new idea and a new frontier to think, if the architects of the Bauhaus were alive today, what would they be doing? And at the end of the day, this is something that we also want to design. So I'm talking only about architecture and about the physical vision of the city, but we want to design a system for the entire housing system. That's not just about one building here and a building there. Yes, we want to live a system for the housing market that has 3 possibilities: private, public for the most fragile people, private for the free market, and a non-profit housing market. This is really non-existent in Lisbon right now. It's not really working. It was important in the past. You've seen the historical graph that I showed. The cooperative movement was very strong in the 80s, 90s, and then it kind of fell down, and we want to relive it again. We feel it has to be part of the history of the city as well. So we want to have the 3 possibilities: public, private, and non-profit. And how are we going to build a non-profit? And that's what I'm showing you in the back. We provide the land, the private provides the construction. It is more or less as simple as that. And they can be there in a leasehold mode, in the leasehold system for about 90 years. The land is always property of the City Hall. Lisbon has a lot of land. That's also a very important note. So we can do this. And I think the land is going to be the basis for us to have this public-private market. That's going to be a non-profit housing system, hopefully. This is the land that we have, the potential that we have found so far. So as we said, we have an agreement with the resilience plan for 4,400 houses. But Lisbon has this potential. We have the potential of 9,000 houses, at least. And that's where we hope to start designing and to start building and to start imagining this private property market where we give the land and the private provides the construction. So with this, I end, hoping that you are going to enjoy this day. I'm not going to be here for every minute, but I'm going to be here as much as I can. And at the end of the day, I really, really, really want to get this done. So talk to me if you have anything to say, anything interesting that can help us go through this very important task that we have at hand. It's a unique opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity, and we're not going to fail.
So thank you, Councilwoman Filipa. Thank you very much for your presentation. As Filipa has to leave in a moment, so we'll now open the floor for questions. Well, there was a lot of information, interesting information, so please be free to ask now. It's the opportunity.
Ask to answer questions.
There is a microphone.
Filipa, I was going to call on Filipa. Filipa, go. I have a question, yes. Okay. So the cooperative initiative is, we have, from those 9,000, from the potential of 9,000 houses, we've located about 500 that we think are interesting for the cooperative movement. What we're going to do is that, and you're going to see this hopefully as soon as possible. I'm really trying to find Margarida because if this was a great world, by tomorrow this would be online because this is really, really coming out. We have the land belongs to the City Hall, and we have an international competition to design the project. So the City Hall is going to give the land and the project. So it's going to be part of the Lisbon Imagine a New European Bauhaus competitions for architectural practices. And the first site is going to come out next week, whatever, so you're going to find what this next site is going to be. When the project is over, so we're going to develop the project, the City Hall. Yes, we're going to give you the land, develop the project, and we're going to give you the land with the project. Hopefully by January, February, we can open up the movement for the cooperative movement. We've been talking a lot to the cooperative movement, to several cooperative initiatives that are popping up everywhere, to try to see how we can choose them, because that's a very interesting decision. We're going to have much more interest than houses, possibly. So once again, we need to have a competition to distribute these houses. And so we're trying to find criteria to decide who's going to have the plots. And we are working on this, and we're going to hopefully have the regulations until the end of the year. But we are working on the criteria with the cooperative movement as well. So the idea is that they're going to also help us define these criteria, how we're going to give the plots to the people. So hopefully more is going to come soon, but it's like this. So what I can give you right now in numbers is we're going to launch 500 houses in cooperative in this mode where I'm going to give you the plot for 90 years, 90, and you build. But I'm going to give you the plot with an approved project. And I think that's a very important thing. Because a lot of the problems with the cooperative movement in Lisbon is that they died while they were doing the project. Yes, they lost a lot of time in developing the project, urban planning, whatever, so they disappeared while the project was going on. So our decision, the different thing is going to be, I'm going to give you the plot with the project approved. And if you want to come, come. If you don't want to come, don't come. But when you come, you need to come to build. So you have about a few months to organize yourself and start building very fast. So you need to have a cooperative movement already somehow in place. I think the plots that we've chosen for the cooperative are quite interesting. We try to keep the cooperative small. So we think it's a perfect typology for the small plots that we have, like 20 houses each, because big cooperatives are a problem. People like 200 houses, it's impossible. So we're trying to have we're trying to use the cooperative to rehabilitate the small houses that the City Hall has. And I think that's going to be also a very interesting possibility. Because for the City Hall itself, it's impossible to rehabilitate all its properties. So it's also a help to rehabilitate the properties, and I think it's going to be different and a bit new, but I think it might work. So we've established 500 houses for this. Let's hope. But that's not in the resilience plan, because that's obviously the construction is going to be paid by the people that are applying for the cooperatives. I'm not sure if this is clear enough, but I think, but the plan here, because we really want to invent a system, and we're not only thinking of the resilience plan, we're also thinking about inventing a system. Because of this, the cooperative is very important, because we think it's going to be a very strong foundation of this municipal system that we're designing with the public, private, and non-profit. The cooperative, in the history of Lisbon, has built a lot of houses. It has been a success. We can see that in the history, in the graph that I showed. So we just need to understand why it failed and how we can relive it. And I think urban planning has something to do with it. So if we give the project with the plot of land, and whenever the cooperative comes, they just start building, it's a bit easier, I think. Questions? One in the back. Sim. Bauhaus, sim.
Isso tem alguma coisa a ver com aquele movimento artístico alemão do início do século, em que tenta-se fazer um compromisso entre uma funcionalidade, simplicidade e ao mesmo tempo ser uma coisa estética. Tem alguma coisa a ver ou tem outra razão?
Now this is a very dangerous path because you've asked this question to somebody that can talk about this for an hour. Yeah, but I'm going to give you the 5-minute answer. I'm going to give you the 5-minute because I am an enthusiast of the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was an architectural school at the beginning of the 20th century that had one idea: merging culture and technology, making the world as advanced as possible technologically, but as beautiful as possible. So the painter was as important as the inventor, as the industry. The craftsman was as important as the person developing the state-of-the-art iron tube. And that's just beautiful for me. So the fact, and there's another thing, there was an extraordinarily strong school. It lasted very briefly, and it was finished by the Nazis. So it was really finished by the Nazis. I mean, the directors of the school had to run to the United States. The most famous being Gropius, who went to the United States to be the leader of the Harvard School, which is one of the best today. And Mies van der Rohe, of course, the third director of the school, went to Chicago to be the head of the School of Chicago. So imagine what this is. It was the strongest architectural school of the century, no doubt. It really influenced the design of architecture throughout the 20th century. And the two directors of the school went to lead the most irrelevant schools today. It was really, really a very strong school who was killed by the Nazis, literally. So how beautiful is this that we can revive it? But the thing is that, and this is the most important message, I think, it's not to design as they designed. It's to have their attitude and not design the shapes they designed. Is to have their attitude, to really be able to merge culture and technology. So the attitude is what we want, and it's a beautiful attitude. Who was killed by a horrible regime. So the fact that we can actually revive it and say, we can do better, I think it's beautiful. Yes, so it has everything to do with the Bauhaus. And that's why it's so important to have at the highest political level somebody talking about this architectural school, the most relevant of the 20th century, without doubt. Any more questions? You see that I could talk about this forever, yeah? But I'll leave, and I'm ready. I'm going to... you have one, John. Ron has one, okay.
So I took the liberty to put one of your slides. Maybe you can... Podem pôr a apresentação que está.
Okay.
This one, because this is your clock. So I think it's a quite interesting instrument to look. So can you explain a little bit more of how does it work?
Yes.
And the second question is
because of WordPress, the only thing that we really don't have is time. Everything else is here. We have plot, we have the land, we have the money, we have the people, we have the skills. We just don't have time. So we designed this clock to make sure. You want me to explain?
Yeah, just second question is with this clock and with the time, and even if we have a very good team, a technical team in the municipalities, is it real to think that we will be able to deliver it in 2026?
I'll answer in 2025.
Okay.
But I'll make sure. What I think is that it's difficult. I think the biggest challenges, and I think I've said this, the biggest challenge I think that I'm scared about is the construction costs, honestly. That's really the biggest challenge, because that's really going to put a strain, because the construction costs, because of the war, are just rising. And we have had competition without any construction company coming to provide the service. For me, that's really the risk. The really, really, really biggest, that's the most dangerous cloud in our horizon, because it's going to ruin all the planning. If we've had construction that we've had to relaunch with 20% on top, and that's really the most. I think that's going to be the most. For me, that's the biggest problem, and that's the thing that might give me some cloud. But I'm not optimist, as you've seen, and I really think we put this clock, which works like this. If you see, it's the houses that we have finished, the houses that we have in construction, and the houses that we have in project, and the houses that we have studying. So that, and then it's like a clock, because I know that if it's finished, it's done. I know that if it's in construction, it's going to be in the horizon of 2 years. It's a 2-year period at the most to end. And if it's a project, it's a 4-year possibility of. And if it's study, it's something that I really shouldn't really be counting on that too much. So we put together this clock, and we're really always looking at the clock and trying to see how the time is running. So I think the biggest enemies that we have, to answer your question, is this real. We have 2 big enemies: time and construction costs. Those are the 2 ones that I identify. I think everything else we can get around. It's difficult. Bureaucracy is a challenge. It's really, but I think we can face bureaucracy and we'll get around it. But time and construction costs, there's no way. If the construction costs would just go sky high because of the war, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing. So I think that's. Well, we need to have strategies. We're working on Plan A, B, C, D. So hopefully, we'll get it done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Filipa. So now we go straight to the second presentation, which is from Annika Bradhart. Maybe Annika is something like that. So, welcome, Annika. Annika is representing here the European Commission. So Annika started to work as an economic journalist for Reuters, a news agency, for more than a decade. Then in 2014, she joined the President Juncker's commission as spokesperson for economic and financial affairs. And finally, she came to the best city in Europe. Oh, sorry for the other, but well, at least more beautiful than in Brussels. Yeah. Then to the European Commission representation in Lisbon, dealing with the economic affairs, so as economic advisor. Thank you, Annika, for coming.
João, posso fechar o computador? Thank you very much, and what an act to follow, Filipa. Not quite an easy one, but thank you very much, João. Thank you, Jebal. Thank you to the city of Lisbon for organizing this interesting conference. I am coming early in the conference, and I realize Filipa has already delved right into the subject, but I'm going to go and take a step back. I'll pause for a minute and let us remind us of where we've come from. So I'm going to be talking more about the Recovery and Resilience Facility, terribly named as always when things come to from Brussels, but hopefully on content a little bit more attractive than the name. This Recovery and Resilience Facility, it really has a strong social dimension, and as such, the topic of social housing, it's really one of the landmark features of the social part of this facility. It's become obviously even more acute now today that we have the Russian war on Ukraine that is bringing economic and social consequences throughout Europe. But like I said, more on that later. First things first, where have we come from? That I'll do in my first part, then I'll give you a quick state of play of where I think we are today in the implementation of the plans across Europe. And finally, and I gather from Filipa's presentation as well, that's what people might care about most, certainly also in Portugal. What are the challenges lying ahead for us? So where do we come from? And that's something that really struck me today on the way in. I saw hardly anyone wearing a mask. Traffic is back to pre-COVID normal. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it might actually be worse. And I greeted a friend on the street with 2 kisses. So what a different world we have today than we had 2.5 years ago. And I think it's important just to remember that. So where were we 2.5 years ago? COVID had just started. There were insecurity, fears, uncertainties across Europe, which meant that member states were a little bit tempted to go it alone, to muddle through, as we like to say. But I think Europe acted quickly, and Europe learned from the important lessons from the previous crises, which is that acting together decisively and in solidarity really can make a huge difference. And hopefully that's what we're beginning to see now. That meant that within months we saw the birth of this Recovery and Resilience Facility. With it, we now have tools to help us on the green and digital transitions in Europe, and we have tools to implement, to address social challenges to a degree that I think we might not have had at a European level beforehand. And who would have thought this 10 years ago, again, also here in Portugal, that the European Commission is now able to borrow on the market. It's borrowing money on the market to finance these recovery and resilience plans. So far, the Commission has borrowed about 150 billion euros. So what is this terribly named Recovery and Resilience Facility? It's at the heart of the Next Generation EU scheme. It's 750 billion euros of grants and loans to help member states implement reforms and investments. And I'll actually contradict Filipa for the only one time that I'll do it now, when she said that Ursula von der Leyen, our president, gave the plans to the member states. We very much didn't, because it was very much the member states that designed their own plans, and I think that's what's causing the ownership. And you know, making implementation a little bit more tangible. Of course, these plans had to be and are in line with EU's priorities, They have to address challenges that are identified for each country within the economic governance framework of the EU, and the measures that are included in the plan are meant to achieve a social, fair, digital, green economy fit to resist the next crisis. It is a temporary instrument. I think I keep having to stress that. And then, why are we talking about the RF today? You already started talking about social housing. Each country, aside from having a target to spend 37% of the overall plan on climate measures, 20% on digital measures, also has to, through their plan, strongly promote social measures. This facility does so by focusing investments on social cohesion, on implementing the so-called European Pillar of Social Rights, which was an agreement between the member states to really focus on social inclusion. And it focuses also on the relevance of gender equality and equal opportunities for all. I'd like to give you a few real-life examples of social measures that member states have included in their plans beyond Portugal. So, for instance, the Romanian plan, I don't know if we have a colleague here from Romania today, but the Romanian plan will provide support to low-income households for the connection to public water supply and sewers. Croatia is introducing a reform and an investment to provide social mentoring to individuals at risk or already in a marginalized position in society. And in Italy, we have a reform that aims to improve the social services and the living conditions of elderly people losing autonomy and losing access to society in that sense. Those are just three of 216 measures that we've counted across the plans that are worth 13.4 billion euros linked to social protection and inclusion. So where are we today? And I think this is probably where I should switch to Portuguese. I'd like to say implementation across the board of national plans is fully on track. Está no bom caminho. But it has only just started. And this, I think, is particularly important for investments, and I'd like to say this here, where I know the national debate is very much focused on so-called delays. Of course, investments take time to roll out. There are visas, there are tenders in the beginning. The money in an investment program like that is never spent in a linear way. This is also why we at the Commission, and in the contract that we have with every member state, we focus on the implementation of so-called milestones and targets that we have agreed. We don't focus so much about how much money has been spent from the national budget to final beneficiaries. But I don't want to bore you with too many details. Just to say, está no bom caminho, está a correr bem, e it will take some time. So this is true, like I said, in particular for investments, but also the rollout for reforms, we are just beginning to start seeing the effects. To date, again, to show that things are on track, the European Commission has assessed, and the European Council, so the member states have approved 26 member states' plans, so all but one. The Commission has paid out 115 billion to 9 countries. Spain and Italy have already received a second payment, and here in Italy we are currently assessing the second payment, here in Portugal, excuse me, we are currently assessing the second payment request that we received from Portugal in September, and in fact that's part of the reason why I'm going to not be able to spend the whole day here as much as I'd very much like to. In terms of the social requirements, and especially talking about social housing specifically, coming back to what I said, it's a landmark feature. Member states have really included some strong social housing measures, and I won't go into the details of the designs because you all know much better than me, but I counted that 14 member states have included social housing measures, so both reforms and investments in their plans. And the reforms are obviously much needed because they're likely to yield a more structural, long-term effect, but the investments can give that impetus that is also needed. And maybe to come back also to the presentation from earlier, here in Portugal, the social housing measure, I think you already showed it, 1.211 billion euros. It's the single biggest grants measure within the Portuguese plan, which I think also shows the importance of this measure. I think also especially in a country where public housing stock accounts for 2% of total stock, I think this will really be a good start to address the structural shortage of permanent and temporary housing for the more vulnerable groups. And as a side note that I like particularly, aside the new Bauhaus, but what I really like is that there's a focus also on energy efficient building, which I think in a country where a quarter of the population lives in energy poverty, it's also very important. And those of us who live here, and yes, it is the best city in Lisbon, I'll be killed if I tell my colleagues in Brussels, but yes, very much enjoy living here. But those of us who do live here know that the winters can be unexpectedly uncomfortable, I would say. So the energy poverty also playing a role. Of course, and I'm sure this will come up in discussions, and has already come up in the discussions today. These 26,000 units can only be a start. And in a way that takes me neatly to what I promised would be my final point. What are the challenges we're facing today? Now, I already mentioned the Russian war on Ukraine. It has triggered a major energy crisis that's causing social and economic effects across all of Europe. And that has exacerbated a supply shortage in material. It's caused bottlenecks in labor, and it has further driven up prices that were already on the rise on the back of the COVID crisis. Personally, and I have to stress, this is really my personal view only, I take some hope from the fact that the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, as well as other recent EU measures, thinking about vaccines, for instance, have been really a major step in the ability of Europeans to act together, to cooperate, and to show solidarity. But of course, this new crisis has prompted or worsened let's say the new crisis that that has been prompted or worsened by the war, it has also made it significantly harder to implement the plans in such a short time span. 2026, of course, it's not a long time to finish all these constructions in the best of times. So there are several consequences of this for the recovery plans. First, in response to the energy crisis, we're now adding a so-called Repower EU chapter, and you'll see we come up with great names in the European Commission. We will add this so-called Repower EU chapter to the recovery and resilience plans. Those bring into the plans reforms and investments that we need to reduce Europe's energy dependence and to speed up the deployment of renewable energy across Europe. This will come with additional financing, with additional funding, the bulk of which is the 225 billion euro loans that haven't been taken yet from the Recovery and Resilience Funds facility. Obviously, by its very, very design, it's more, the facility has encouraged member states to take up first grants and only then supplement with loan support when and where needed and where it makes economic sense. But with the Russian war in Ukraine, we feel that there's a resulting need for energy diversity and independence. We feel that, therefore, it gives a strong impetus to take up this loan support as well. So that's kind of the first consequence. The Repower EU chapter and the additional funding that comes with it. In terms of the rising prices, now, I have to be very clear here, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, as per the regulation that was agreed with Parliament and among member states, it doesn't really provide for the possibility to update or revised cost estimates. So those were made at the very beginning. And that's because the Recovery and Resilience Facility is performance-based, and its financing isn't linked directly to the actual costs. But it is very clear that the effects of the recent geopolitical events on energy prices, on construction materials, shortages, it's clear that these may have a direct effect and are having a direct effect on the capacity to implement some investments included in the plans. Now, to the extent that there are individual investments or even milestones and targets within these investments, which member states can therefore no longer objectively achieve, really for objective reasons, the Commission will be ready to discuss these measures with the national authorities and will find a solution for these difficulties. Now, these upcoming updates that we're having of the plans, first of all, to include the Repower EU chapter, and in some countries, like in Portugal, to also allow for an additional 1.6 billion allocation here. Those negotiations are really the time to be looking at this together with the national authorities. And rest assured, in Portugal, this is going on with the national government, like the minister said the other day, we will start probably formally renegotiating the plan or opening for these chapters in January. Needless to say, this affects only investments. Reforms are generally not cost dependent. And of course, no such request can completely undermine the overall implementation of a recovery and resilience plan. So it's really targeted at individual measures. And number three, I think also a debate that's relatively important in Portugal, so I'll reiterate it here. The crisis has really only made a focused, committed and speedy implementation of the recovery plans even more important. The facility and Next Generation EU, it's a one-off instrument. It runs until 2026. So the focus is and needs to be really fully on successful implementation of the RRPs to boost the recovery and to build resilience. We have less than 4 years to implement, and therefore we can really only urge member states to focus on that now. And I'll say it again, just to be clear, 2026 is a fixed deadline. So all the talk and on renegotiation and flexibility can only be within that 2026 deadline. With those points made, I hope I was able to show you a little bit the background of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. I wish you a very lively day or two of lively debates, and I hope that I've been able to set a little bit of a positive groundwork for the day. And of course, I'm ready to take questions as well if there are any.
Thank you, Annika, for your brilliant presentation. Is there any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to Lisbon. I was wondering, you're saying Commission will discuss with the national government. I'm asking the Commission already considered if there will be a proportion between loans and subventions, or will be overburden on loans?
You mean Portugal specifically?
Yes, specifically, but if you want to answer.
Okay. So,
thank you so much.
In general, member states had an allocation of grants and of loans. Like I've said, most member states are very much focused on grants because they don't have to be paid back, and only some have taken up a bit of loans, which has led to there being quite a lot of loans being available still. Now, what happened is that when the Recovery and Resilience Facility was agreed, we didn't know exactly, we knew how the early pandemic had affected each member state, and we could say what effect it had on growth then, but we didn't know how was the economy of each member state going to develop a year, 2 years later. So based on that, and to make sure that it's really a fair deal, member states agreed that there would be a final allocation based on last year's economic growth. Now, for Portugal, that means that Portugal will get an additional 1.6 billion euros, quite a lot of money. For those who are not from Portugal, the current plan is 16.6 billion, plus the Repower EU chapter. So for Portugal, there's more money coming. Some other countries are less fortunate, or maybe they're fortunate in the sense that they've had more growth than was previously expected, so their allocation will actually be reduced now. Now, this is not the issue here. We are encouraging member states where it makes sense to consider taking up loans, but of course these 1.6 billion, they're additional grants. So I wouldn't be able to say that there is there's a disequilibrium between grants and loans. Certainly in Portugal there is this extra money coming that is fully grants, but there is also the option to take a loan component if desired.
Thank you very much for the note and the optimism, which I always like. Well, I'm going to ask you about bureaucracy, because I think that's the third bureaucracy, the problem with the paperwork, yeah? Because that's another challenge in Portugal. We have time and costs, and I think that's all across the board. And I'm wondering, do other countries also have this problem with paperwork? Because here, I think we can handle the paperwork, but it's a nightmare. It's completely gigantic. And I'm wondering, is this coming from the European Commission, or is this why the amount of paperwork that's required for each single house is bizarre, really? So we're going to get it done, but we have to have an extra team, extra people, just for the paperwork. Mm-hmm. And that's, is this all across the board, or is this just a Portuguese problem?
You're not one for easy questions. Now, obviously, I mentioned that each member state was able to design their own plan, and that meant they also designed how they wanted to do the implementation. So in Portugal, we all know there's Recupera Portugal that reports to the tutela, that reports to the Ministry of the Presidency, and then there's the structure of intermediary beneficiaries, which are really once badly named by Portugal, but they shouldn't be called beneficiaries because they're just the agencies and ministries that implement the funds, and then they're the final beneficiaries. Now, in a way, the system is set up here is very much a function of the way EU funds have been spent in Portugal for many years. So, you know, using an existing structure, the existing structure of agencies, it's led to a very decentralized system. And of course, the more you decentralize, the more that central structure, Recupera, will need proof that the decentralized agencies are implementing everything to the letter, right? I do have to say that the Recovery and Resilience Facility is a completely new way of us doing business, in the sense that, you know, previously funds were spent, the implementing agency or municipality, whoever was spending, would pay the money, would do the project, would do the works, and hand in the receipt afterwards, and then the Commission would pay. Now this is very different, that we only pay once we see you have built X houses that we have agreed in our contract, this so-called council implementing decision. And this contract really does lie down to, you know, to the last comma, how many buildings, how many units have to be built by each quarter. You know this better than me. What's the energy efficiency that has to be fulfilled, that they do not do no significant harm to the environment. So they are very detailed. But I think, I mean, I deal mostly with the Portuguese plan, but it strikes me that some of the things you might mention are a function of how the Portuguese system is set up as well. But of course, it's a very work-intense system when you're checking every milestone and target has been implemented to the letter.
Hello. One more question about the prices, because we are facing high prices of raw materials, and the data shows that in each country construction processes are slowing down. So I'm representing Housing Europe, so we represent all social housing providers across Europe, and we see that, for example, in Germany, the social housing provider had to slow down 20% of the new construction, even though we have also Ukrainian refugees and increasing homeless people, so increasing demand for social housing. And the Chancellor of Lisbon, Filipa, mentioned that according to the recovery plan, they need to deliver 3,000 housing in 3 years, which is quite impossible considering all these factors that we mentioned. So is it is the European Commission considering on changing something, adapting the process to the new reality? And what are these considerations? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I did just want to come back very briefly to your previous point about the bureaucracy. Not wanting to justify that Brussels always comes with bureaucracy, but we are under very close scrutiny from the European Court of Auditors, and I think rightly so, because a lot of money is being spent. In Portugal, the plan accounts for more than 6% of the GDP. That's money to flow into the country between 21 and 26. That's a significant amount. And the European Court of Auditors has said, and is doing it, they are analyzing every single milestone of every single target of every single payment request that we've received this year. And we've seen it for Spain, because they made the first payment request. They really do go into the detail. So I think it's kind of in everyone's interest that we do, I know it's tedious, but that we do it well, to have also the democratic accountability. to have the transparency and to minimize any risk of fraud or corruption. There are a few more things I could say about that, but I'm not as excited about that as you were about New Bauhaus. Now, on the point you mentioned, like I said, I mean, we are very aware that there are the shortage and the rising prices make it very difficult to implement certain investment measures or even just achieve a target or a milestone in time. On those specific measures, milestones or targets, we will be entering with the member states into negotiations of how to adjust. So within the timeline of 2026, there is a chance of flexibility on implementing the measures. There is, of course, also always the possibility of saying, look, we now no longer can build X. We need to reduce the target. We need to reduce the overall target, and then maybe the rest can be done outside of the recovery and resilience facility, where you don't have that very, very strict time frame. But this also affects some plans more than others. Portugal, for instance, is a very infrastructure project heavy plan. So of course, in a plan like this, rising prices and shortages, both on the material as well as on the labor side, have a bigger effect than in other countries that may not have gone for such infrastructure heavy plans. I think that's it.
Hello, Carlos Bahia from Faro Municipality. I don't know if I got right your words, but for what I understood from your last words, it is not on the table to change the deadline to follow the plan. And if that is right, that is a concern for me when I look to Portugal, because these days you have the building, we are talking about housing, but for me the housing is competing with education, it is competing with health and with other sectors on the building of infrastructures. Then you have a problem that has to do with the capability that is installed, you know, because these sectors are really competing, in my opinion, and then you put the prices on that equation that gets everything worse. When you launch the public consultancy to build, we have that experience in Faro. We had the prices from 6 months ago with Iru, but then the prices were 30% higher. Then we had to start everything all over. So with all this process, it has to be done, it has to do with transparency, but every day that passes, it is one day less that we have to execute the program. So I'm really concerned that we don't have enough time to do everything that we propose to do. There's also another thing that I don't hear anybody talking about it, but, and I hope that this happens, if the war ends in Ukraine, probably many companies will work there because they will have a huge opportunity to make business, and then it will lack in other countries. So my concern, going back to the end, is that really if we want to spend all this money, well spent of course, I don't think that 2026 will be enough for that. Thank you.
Okay. I hear you. Now, there is a very dry reason why 2026 cannot be extended. It's even if you wanted to, I don't believe that it's possible. Now, this is because, and this sounds very dry, but the RF regulation runs until 2026. Now, we had, it was, I think, I don't know if anyone remembers or cared about this, but in Brussels, people certainly still carry a little trauma from this. But being able to negotiate that the Commission was able to borrow money in a way, a common debt instrument, a common borrowing from the Commission for a common European project, it was a very difficult process. Now, this so-called own resources decision, that's what this was part of. It requires unanimity among member states. And there simply is no political will in some other member states to reopen this. So 2026, it's a fixed deadline. Everything else would be a miracle. It's a fixed deadline. But that is why within that deadline, we're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can. Portugal, in a way, is in a lucky situation as it is receiving additional allocation. So hopefully on the cost, something, I mean, really your interlocutor should be Recuperar or the government, because it's really up to them to decide where they want to spend that additional money that Portugal will receive. Now, on the lack of or on the lack of, or on the competition between measures and also between plans, in a way, there's something that, you know, you might not want to have out there in the big national debate, but the RRF is a solidarity program across Europe. There are some countries that agreed to this, not so much because of the money they would receive for themselves, but very much because they were hoping their companies would then be able to, you know, start maybe constructing here, start being able to invest. So you know, that was also part of the solidarity. And I think that maybe the competition on the labor side, at least, could be addressed that way to some degree. But we hear you, and that is why we're entering in these negotiations also with the member states. I hope I haven't taken Filipa's enthusiasm out of the discussion now.
Thank you, Anika. It was quite interesting, and I think it was one of the first time that we hear that there might be some flexibility, especially in the targets, not in the deadline, but in the targets, which will be very important.
That's really something to talk to the central government. They need to raise this in their discussions with the Commission.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Anika. Thank you. So now we'll have our coffee break, which is right here on the side. Please be here in the room 5 minutes prior to the beginning of the session. Why? Because it will be an online speaker that is going to enter at 11:30 sharp. So he's in Brussels. So please, let's not make him wait. Thank you very much. So welcome to you all again. We are now starting the second round of interventions, and we will start by an online intervention by Mr. Jonathan Dennis. I know, let's see if he's already in the screen. So, hi, Mr. Dennis, and welcome to our conference. Mr. Dennis is the head of unit of financial instruments and international financial institutions relations. And what we would like, well, the idea is to get to know how does the recovery and facility and the recovery plans match with other EU funds and other EU programs. So, Mr. Dennis, thank you again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from Brussels. I would like to cover three areas in my intervention this morning. I mean, firstly, I'd like to explain a model financial instrument that we've developed for energy efficiency, including in housing. Secondly, I'd like to explain a model which allows the implementation of the new European powerhouse, which I will explain a little bit about as well. And then thirdly, to finish off and to hopefully generate a discussion, to provide you with an example of how cohesion policy support can be combined with RRF money in the same operation, which I think is important for your conference. My intervention will focus mainly on cohesion policy, because that's what we here in the Regional Policy DG are responsible for. And I mean, obviously, we have contacts with our colleagues who are delivering the RRF support, but we focus here on cohesion policy, and we are at the moment in the final stages of the negotiation of the programs, and we are approving the cohesion policy programs, and our aim is to have them all approved by the end of this year. And then the implementation will begin. We also encourage member states and managing authorities to use financial instruments, because we think it's an efficient form of support, and it has many advantages, not least the reflows that come back into the managing authorities once the financial instruments have been running for some time. So we are always very willing to, as today, to explain what we're doing as regards financial instruments. So, first of all, I'd like to explain our energy efficiency financial instrument model. A little bit of explanation about the concept of the model. I mean, the cohesion policy programs are implemented at national or regional level within the member states, and because sometimes managing authorities who run the programs think that financial instruments are complicated, and I mean we don't necessarily agree that they're complicated, but if you've never done one before, it can be challenging. So the purpose of these models are to give managing authorities a framework with which to construct a financial instrument with an implementing partner. It might be an international financial institution, it might be a national promotional bank. Basically, to give some elements of a framework and elements which you can use. You don't. It's not necessary to use all of the elements. I mean, you can be selective, but it's to give you an idea of how to construct the model. So the first model I'm going to talk about is as I said, energy efficiency. Now, as we all know, and we are sitting here today in a rather cold meeting room in our building in Brussels. We all know the importance of energy at the moment, and with the sort of Russian invasion of Ukraine threatening energy supplies to Europe, we need to use less energy. That's the short-term reason. I mean, and the long-term reason is climate change, and we have the COP27 taking place in Egypt at the moment, and energy efficiency is probably one of the best ways of meeting these two challenges, and making investments in energy efficiency is clearly advantageous. So you can see that there's a large amount of energy consumption, 40%, and nearly 40% of CO2 emissions in the EU currently come from buildings. And over 3/4 of these buildings are energy inefficient. Old or not built to current standards, lots of heat loss through roofs, through floors, through windows. And we believe that energy savings are the quickest and the cheapest ways to address the energy crisis, reduce bills for citizens and for enterprises and for public authorities, and to address the climate change issue and the CO2 emissions. And in May of this year, the Commission adopted a communication called Repower EU, which proposes an increase in the binding energy efficiency target for member states from 9% to 13%, which is a large percentage increase in relative terms, but is still relatively low. Still a relatively low percentage. We see. We encourage the use of financial instruments where there is, in one or both of two occasions, where the project concerned generates revenue, or where there are cost savings. And energy efficiency projects typically generate savings on energy expenses. So we believe that, I mean, typically a loan product can be used to pay for the cost of the works to increase the energy efficiency of a building, and then the savings on the energy expenses can be used to repay the loans. But it's not always possible to use a pure loan, and sometimes grants are also needed. Now, in the 2021-2027 programming period, we have made the rules. We've changed the rules so that it is very easy to combine grants and financial instruments in the same project, and the grants can be used for a number of purposes. Firstly, there's often technical support. I mean, the building owner may not have the expertise to know what is the best energy efficiency solutions for their particular building, and typically in multi-apartment buildings, I mean, the grant can be used for the energy audit, where there is a detailed analysis takes place of the building and comes up with recommendations for how to increase the energy efficiency through insulation, through replacement windows, through new more efficient boilers, and so on. So the grant can be used for technical support. Sometimes we want the grant can be used to do a deeper renovation, so to maximise the energy efficiency savings, possibly even getting to a near net zero building. Sometimes the payback time from the cost savings takes a long time. So a grant can be used to mitigate that long payback times. It may well be that the final recipients may be in energy poverty. They may not have the financial ability to repay a pure loan, and sometimes there is a problem with market finance and the availability of market finance, and a grant element can be used to unlock market finance in the particular member state concerned. So the model uses this possibility of combining grants with loans in a single financial instrument operation. It builds on the flexibility, as I said, in Article 58 of the Common Provisions Regulation, and the Common Provisions Regulation is the core legal text which underpins all the programmes in cohesion policy. And basically, as I said at the beginning, it provides examples about how you can construct a financial instrument which is orientated to the market, but also achieves the energy efficiency. And it's a flexible model. So we're not saying that you have to follow each part of the model in its entirety. You can modify it, you can adapt it to national or regional circumstances as necessary. In terms of the amount of grants that are possible at the level of the instrument, the amount in the financial instrument element must be larger than the grant element. But then individual projects, individual investments, you can modulate that percentage so that if you have a relatively if you have a simpler and a richer final recipient, you can perhaps lower the grant rate for that particular recipient, so they don't get too much grant, which they don't really need. But as I said earlier, I mean, in the case of energy poverty, you can go in an individual investment or in an individual building. You might be able to go to as much as 100% grant, but overall, the instrument, the grant element must be less than the loan element of the financial instrument. What buildings are eligible? Residential buildings, which is obviously a key part of what you are all interested in. Schools or other social services buildings. Public administration, and including the courts and fire stations and other civil protection services. And then mixed-use buildings where, so long as at least 50% of the floor space is devoted to one of the previous 3 bullet points. Other activities can occupy the remaining 49% of those buildings, and also commercial buildings. So the eligibility for this model financial instrument is very, very wide, and is so it is genuinely a flexible and agile instrument. And to finish, in terms of what we can actually finance in these buildings, I mean, the obvious ones are to improve the insulation of the building, so the roof, the floors, the walls, and the windows and doors as well. Then, in terms of the actual heating and cooling sources and how that works. So boiler replacement, introduction of heat pumps, which will obviously reduce energy consumption greatly, and then things like hot water and lighting, and also sort of our connection to energy supplies. Then renewables. So typically, obviously, solar panels are eligible. Also, electric vehicle charging stations are also eligible. And then finally, climate adaptation, things like green roofs, which are also eligible, and which will obviously have a big impact on CO2 consumption of the building. So that's the first model. That's the energy efficiency model. I'd now like to talk a little bit about the new European Bauhaus model, which is something that is very dear to the heart of our President von der Leyen, the Commission President, and again, this model is designed for national authorities so that they can implement the new European Bauhaus. What was the rationale for this? Well, the new European Bauhaus is a movement to support the development of beautiful and sustainable places, and also to ensure that there's social inclusion. So it's really a partnership exercise, and partnership is very much at the core of cohesion policy. And the idea is that it brings citizens together with experts and businesses and public and private institutions to really sort of produce projects which make Europe a nice place to live in. We based this model on previous positive experience with urban development measures such as Jessica in the 2007-2013 programming period, which were many of which were very, very successful. And in the new programming period, the 2021-2027, we have a new cross-cutting policy objective, which is policy objective 5, which is Europe being closer to citizens. And that underpins a lot of what New European Powerhouse is about. So the main features of the Powerhouse model. It was launched in June 2022, and again, it's a flexible model. You can choose which elements you want to use, but it's designed for all stakeholders. I mean, obviously, managing authorities will be the principal people to use it, but also people from every level of the investment, the fund managers, the fund recipients, project promoters, as well as others like municipalities, financial institutions, the private sector, the creative sector. And I mean, this is a very important part of the stakeholders. It can be an individual financial instrument. The model allows for a dedicated European Powerhouse financial instrument to be set up, or it can be a part of a financial instrument, or to illustrate just how flexible it is, it can support individual NEB projects. And like the energy efficiency instrument, it's the combination of the financial instrument, which could be a loan, a guarantee, equity, quasi-equity, combined with grants. Again, the grants enable us to reach a wider range of fund recipients, enable the NEB values to be applied, and I'll go through the NEB values in a second. And as with the energy efficiency one, there is the possibility of 100% grants, as I said, for those in energy poverty. And the whole thing promotes a sort of a one-stop shop approach, so that there is one place where interested stakeholders can go to develop the financial instruments. So this is I won't go through this slide in very much detail, but I think the most important thing is that it should be integrated into a local or a territorial integrated development strategy. So really, to do these things as sort of ad hoc and one-off isn't really the purpose. It should fit in within an integrated development strategy. And then there are as I said, the partnership is important, and it can link in with other European policy initiatives, and the ex-ante assessment, which is normally required for all new financial instruments, should address the NEB core values. And these core values are the following. So the first core value is sustainability, so environmental sustainability. So this will include. This should address climate issues. So in that sense, you may have a project which can fit in with this one, or it can fit in with the energy efficiency as well, and you have a choice of which model to use. The second core value is aesthetics, and that the project should look good. And again, the involvement of architects and so on, but also citizens should be involved in developing the projects so that it makes the local area a nicer place to live in, more appealing place to live in. And then the final core value is inclusiveness. So really, again, it shouldn't just be aimed at a narrow group of citizens or financial recipients. It should be inclusive. It should improve the life possibilities of everyone living in the local area. And finally, there's a bit more about the one-stop shop. So it's essentially designed to make it easy to use for final recipients, coordinating the combination of financial. Coordinating the financial instruments and grants to get more efficiency, to get economies of scale, to get increased pooling of funds, and basically to make sure that the stakeholder partnership is really works well together, and to screen the projects, so to make sure that all the projects are NEP compliant, and also to develop the capacity of the stakeholders concerned. As well as the three core values, there are four thematic axes in the New European Bauhaus transformative path. So these are reconnecting with nature. So typically, you could, if you were renovating a building, I mean, which will provide the revenue, and you can use the loan part of the investment to renovate the building, and use the revenues from the building's use to pay off the loan. But then, if you go outside, you can use grants to plant trees and green the environment around the building. To regain a sense of belonging, again, this is very much related to inclusiveness. To think long term about life cycles of buildings, products, and so on in the industrial ecosystem, and finally to prioritise the places and people that need it most. So really to make sure that it is inclusive. So, having explained the models and these two models, which we think will be really useful for managing authorities to use to develop financial instruments, both on energy efficiency and on the New European Bauhaus, I want to give you an example of how we've combined cohesion policy support and the RRF in a concrete case. So in Latvia, there's an organisation called Altum, which is a national promotional institution, which in the 2014-2020 programming period has already renovated over 600 buildings, and has used grants and financial instruments, but in separate operations, because the rules for the 2014-2020 period are more complicated to combine grants and financial instruments into one operation. So over 170 million euros of European Regional Development Fund has gone into this. And as I said, they've renovated, expect to renovate until the end of next year, over 600 buildings. So building on the success of this project in the 2014-2020 programming period, they are proposing to use both RRF and ERDF to finance energy efficiency in residential buildings from now on. So in RRF, they're expecting to use 57 million euros to renovate around about 170 buildings. And this will be, the grant will be a capital rebate. So in other words, basically reducing the size of the repayments on the loan, typically at the end of the period of repayment. And then to complement this, they'll also be using 100 million euros of European Regional Development Fund to renovate further buildings. So this is all done by one financial intermediary, but using the different sources of union support, both the RRF and the European Regional Development Fund. So this I think demonstrates that. Looking back to the title of my presentation, which is links between recovery plans and other EU financing instruments, complement or parallel paths. This is a clear example that the RRF and cohesion policy funds can be used in a complementary way to achieve energy efficiency objectives in residential buildings. But depending on the objectives of the cohesion policy programme and the milestones agreed with the Commission for the RRF, it can be used for other aspects of building and housing policy. So that is my presentation, and thank you very much indeed. And I will. I have two colleagues here with me who were responsible for producing this presentation, and I'm happy to take questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dennis, for your presentation. In fact, it's quite important. It's quite relevant that we have this idea that we can combine the different instruments to complement the projects or to make better projects, and also this can be used maybe to help financing issues on the municipalities and on the other companies. So is there any question from the audience? Maybe not. Yes. Oh, sorry. There is a question, but there is no mic. Just a moment.
of the European Commission through the European semester, so the countries improve their housing market and the environment for more investment for social housing. And we see that some of the countries will follow these recommendations with their plans. And we also looked at the link to the national energy and climate plans. And we saw that there is a moderate consistency in some countries, but they are mostly aligned with the national energy and climate plans. But we also draw a conclusion that even though the two plans are in line, we will need more public interventions, more public funding for our sector. So to conclude, we saw that some countries were extremely ambitious, like Portugal and Spain, and other countries stayed with the business as usual approach. And we also can see that it is a fact that the recovery plans putting a lot of money into the sector, but this is not enough. We see a bigger investment gap in the sector. We see 52 billion that will be dedicated, but the investment gap is 57 billion per year. So it is just a tiny bit of the funding that we need. So we need more public participation. So, and we also see that there will be a problem with the absorption ability that was already discussed this morning. So if the absorption is like in the case of the European structural funds, there will be some problems. So we will need to see how to adjust to the new reality. We also looked at if the plans will be enough to eradicate energy poverty. So from my previous comments, you could guess that not. So we will need more funding as well and more efforts to eradicate energy poverty. So we would need more reforms and different funding schemes following the European energy efficiency standards to be able to tackle the energy poverty that we face. And finally, we also looked at the capacity and skills gap, and as mentioned, it is a big issue, and we would need to have more advisory services for the countries. So this is what we try to make the European Commission understand, that we need more advisory because our sector has a big skill gap. So to conclude, we made two important points to the European Commission in this publication. So we need to increase public investment to the sector because this money is not enough. And the member states should choose projects based on evidence. So first, they would need to do the research and base their political decisions on evidence. So these are the main big points of the publication. So I thank you very much for this quick time that you gave me, and I'm happy to answer to questions if there is any. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith, for a brilliant presentation. Very quick, due to, as you can see, there's a lot of work being done using the recovery fund in different countries, very different approaches, but still a gap. Still, there is a gap. But some of this gap can be filled with, like in the previous presentation, with some other funds, right? Yeah. So, any questions from the audience? No, it was so clear. So that's okay. Thank you very much, Edith.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, what will happen is that, as if you see it in the program, that will be the lesson speaker in the morning. But what we'll do, as we have to, as I told you on the beginning, there was one presentation that should be tomorrow, but this gentleman who was coming got COVID, so he couldn't come. So there will be his presentation in the afternoon by a colleague. So what we'll do is that I will do the presentation that was supposed to be done at 2:30, so that at 2:30 session there is still 3 speakers as before. Okay, so what I will do is, and this part of the program now we're starting to look at the details of each national recovering plans. So we have the details, we have ourselves from Portugal, from Spain, from Greece, from Slovenia, from Ireland, and from Austria. Okay? So I'll do my presentation from Portugal. Let me just put presentations here. No, it's not this one. No. Just a second, please. Sorry. é possível. Ok. Okay, sorry for this. Costumamos dizer em casa de ferreiro espeto de pau. E andei a pedir a toda a gente cuidado com os PowerPoints, introduzam lá isso para se pôr no computador e o meu não veio. Portanto, peço desculpa pelo atraso. Well, what I'm going to speak is about the Portuguese National Resilience Plan. I'm going to give you an overview of it. This is a title that I choose for it. It's for the social housing opportunity for doing something in many years. I would say decades. A huge package of money that could be invested in social housing. So this recovery facility that was created by the EU was a necessity following the COVID crisis and the slowing down of all the economies of the EU area. So there was a need to boost the economy, and they do it pretending to be an investment plan. So it's a plan that should build things, that should create new things. So it's invest. So they created the Recovery and Resilience Facility. What is new in this instrument is that for the first time it allows investment in housing. As I think all of you know, housing is not a EU competence, so housing is a state competence, so each state is responsible for the housing, so it's not a competence. Of course, when you talk about the EU and you see all the directives and all the legal instruments, of course they have impact on housing, but it's not a political issue from the Commission or from the Council. So that is also one of the motives or the excuses that the European Union said that as this is a national competence, it's not, we don't have to put some money of it. But now this has changed, and for good. So for the first time we have this investment. What are we talking about? We are talking about in a total of about more than 700 billion euros, almost half of them in loans, half in grants, and of course, as Annika said here, and I don't know if you follow it correctly, but this small line here is very important because this money is not money from the EU. So this money that EU is borrowing from the financial markets to give it to the countries. So in the end, we will pay it all that money. Don't worry. So what is the main target of the EU is that the objective is that the GDP can grow at similar to what was supposed to be growing without the COVID pandemic situation that we had. So this is how it's expected the different countries to grow in 2024 in GDP. So Portugal is almost there in 3%, but it's a little bit contradictory because when you see it, new generation EU plans, they say that the GDP should fall by 2026 by between 1.4 or 2.5%. So which means that the increase of the GDP will decelerate throughout the years. And this graphic shows here how it was supposed to have the evolution of the GDP until 2030. What would happen in the blue line if we don't use any measures after COVID? So the GDP would follow as it's in the graph. Without the resilience fund, what is expected is that the GDP grows even furthermore than it was expected if it doesn't exist any COVID. So the next generation EU it's a package of funds. In fact, here you can see in these colors the different dimension of each fund in the global Next Generation EU package, where, of course, the Resilience Fund is the major part of it. Okay, so in the Resilience Fund, some of the, all here. So in the Resilience Fund, there are 6 areas. One of them is the green transition, the digital transformation, and in these 2 areas is where the EU said it's mandatory that you have these 2 areas and that you have specific targets for these 2 areas. The other 4 areas are smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth, social and territorial cohesion, health and economic, social, and institutional resilience, and policies for next generation. So in these 2 areas, green transition and digital transformation, the European Commission said that there should be, European Commission, the Council, of course, because it's approved by all the member states, that at least 37% of the plans of each country should be in green should be spent in green transition objectives, and 20% of the fund should be spent in digital transformation. What the countries did, in fact, was they surpassed these numbers. So in the end, for green transition, the members, the countries, allocated 40% of the fund, and for the digital transformation, 26%. So here you can see a graph, also the different countries. You can see the lines, that line that's dot with dots, it's for the green transition threshold, and the other one below the 20% is for the digital transformation. Portugal has allocated 37.88% in the green transition, so a little bit more than the limit, and 22.12% in the digital transformation. So here we are there in that graph. But this fund, this resilience fund, is not the only instrument that we have. In fact, we have some packages that we already knew before, like Portugal 2020, and then the financial budget for 21-27, Portugal 2030. So there's a lot of programs going on the same period running in Portugal, which in the total we will have more than 61 billion euros in funds to invest in Portugal. So this is a huge number. When we talk about the Resilience Fund, which is the topic of our conference, we talk about 16.4 billion euros plus 2.7 billion. But in the total, in fact, for Portugal will be 61.2 billion euros. So a lot of money. So the Portuguese plan is divided in 2, in grants, in loans. So there's a lot more money to grants than in loans, and it is expected to create 50,000 jobs. The program has 3 dimensions. Our program is the green transition, the digital transition, and the economic and social resilience, which is where the social housing or the housing is included. Of course, as all good, especially Portuguese plans, we complicate it a little bit. So there is 20 components, 32 reforms, 83 investments. I will explain what it is. And of course, 140 milestones, 2001 targets, so a lot of thinking for those who are preparing this plan. What are the components? The components, in fact, is like the strategies, is where do you want to go in? I'm just speaking very briefly on this, of course. The reforms is how to how to make a huge change in the system, and the investment is how to feed the reforms. So, for example, investment in houses, investment in solar panels, energy efficiency, etc. Okay, so then I will share the presentation, which and then it's more precise there. So what was the proposal of the Portuguese government was to relaunch and reorientate the housing policy and give response to permanent structural or temporary shortage of houses. We know, and this is in all countries, there's a huge shortage of houses, affordable houses for people. So this was what was intended to do. Sorry, because this is lost format of it, but well. This is how the money is allocated to each program. This is important because if you look at some documents, we will find in some documents written 1.2 billion euros for housing, and in other documents 2.7, I think, billion euros. But the thing is that, in fact, there are several programs for housing. So not only those who are that program who has the most share of it with 1.2 billion euros for building new houses, but for example, there is and I don't know why they split it. For example, you have here the reinforcement of the supply of housing supported in RAM. RAM is the region of Madeira and also the region of Açores. So I don't know why they decided to split it, maybe political issue, but well. So the total amount is more than 2 billion euros just to invest in housing. 2.7, here you can see the aggregate numbers. So housing is the most relevant program in the Portuguese resilience plan. So it's about 17% of the plan is dedicated to housing. Of course, we got the 2.7 million that are supposed to build 26 new houses. But if we add to this number some more other programs related, for example, with energy efficiency of the buildings, and then, for example, only in that program there's 300 million euros. So there's in all the package of the resilience fund, in fact, there is more money to houses, but it's not on that specific objective, so generally is not considered. So what was the proposal for Portugal was three things. First, new buildings, so construction of new buildings, renovation of the existing dwellings, and third, acquisition of new buildings or lease of buildings or dwellings. The investment should be made, it should be planned based on the local strategies for housing or local plans for housing. And this is like mandatory to have it, so this is one of the problems of municipalities. Some still don't have it, or those who have, or may have it, but not that are modernized, and so they have to change it, so to submit to the European Commission these local strategies. So, and these local strategies should identify all the needs eligible for this program and the entities that could give solutions for it. I'll give you some examples of it, and going quite quick in the presentation. For example, in the Lisbon metropolitan area, there were already 56 applications, 45 for housing 8 for urgent housing and 3 for students housing. So in the total, it was more than 2,000 dwellings, new dwellings, 16 temporary accommodations, and 361 student accommodation beds. In fact, from these 62, they only approved, or they are still looking of the others, but already approved. You have 29 projects, 24 for housing, 3 for temporary housing, and 2 for student housing. Then we have a lot of examples throughout the country. I just put some of them. So, for example, in one of the village from the interior, from the countryside, Oliveira do Hospital, we have 3 buildings. Tondela, 50 beds for elderly persons. And this is just projects that were approved. So there can be more projects in these municipalities, but these were the projects approved. And there is this big package for student residences with 375 million euros that aim to build 50,000 new beds for students, which, as we know, it's a hot topic in Portugal nowadays. So I could give you much more examples of this, just a few of them. There are many of them throughout the country, and the idea to show them is that just exactly to see that housing is not only the building of new housing, it's also the building of elderly care centers, residence for students, residence for disabled people, etc., etc. So it's not a unique thing. And in Madeira and Azores, there's also this kind of investments. Twice. Okay. So this is mainly in a very brief way our resilience plan, how it's structured in the general way. The thing and what I would like to call for discussion, and we already started this discussion in the morning when Mrs. Anika was here from the Commission, and this is where I would like to bring our discussion, is the challenges, because we know the figures. The figures are public. Even if many times it's not public enough, because it's not enough transparent to know the details of the projects and of the applications, etc., etc. So you never know what's really happening behind. But I would like to focus the discussion, and also challenging you to reflect on this, is the main challenges of implementing this program. The first challenge is the increased prices of construction. As we all know, the prices have been growing immensely in a way that can put in risk the projects. It's quite interesting when you see that this graphic starts to grow a lot. It's interesting because it's exactly on the time where the resilience funds was approved. And this is one of the things that I remember to have discussions at this time, that it's like inflation. When the markets know that you are going to put 700 billion euros, that you have money to spend, what the market does, of course, is to raise the prices. And this is something that have been discussed and have been alerted. Maybe this is not the best solution to invest. Maybe we should do it in another way, because this could happen, and this happened. So it's quite at the same time that the prices of the construction rise was with the approval of the facility and with national plans. The second challenge is the lack of materials, and we all face that in our works, in our buildings. In fact, here is a news from a newspaper that say that this lack of materials for construction made the price of these materials rise for 35%. So it's a lot of increase in the price. The third challenge is the lack of workers. And we also know what's happening in different sectors, so it's not only in construction, but of course in construction is very relevant. Let me just go a little bit back to the lack of materials, and just for giving you an example that has been discussing in the last months in Europe, which is, for example, the lack of materials for the agency efficiency measures. Just one example, there isn't enough heat pumps in the market, and there is no possibility to build as much heat pumps that are needed to fill the obligations in the projects and in the plans, for example. So the market, the companies that provide heat pumps simply cannot do it because they don't have the materials, because they don't have capacity to produce it. But in the end, we have in a lot of projects around Europe introduced heat pumps in the system, in the heating system of the buildings. So this is just one example on how this is a challenge that, of course, we don't have a magic wizard to create heat pumps. So what's the solution for this? The fourth challenge is, I would say, availability of construction companies, and this happens especially in Portugal. I don't know if also in Spain, Maria Montes, who is here, may answer this, is that following the previous crisis, there was a lot of companies that went bankruptcy. So they closed down the doors, they dismissed the employers, they sold the machines. This is a news from 2010, remember, look, 2010, saying that 3 companies bankruptcy every day in 2010, construction companies. And what we see in the years from that is that a lot of companies, and this is the biggest companies, the Opway, the MSF, and a lot of other countries went bankruptcy, and so they were not able to get back in the market and get back to work after the crisis, which is a problem. And I know, and of course, everyone from the municipalities, at least that are here, already face things like you have a contract that it's already allocated to a company, that they should start to do it, and they come to you and say, well, sorry, we cannot do it, we will close the company. There are even some cases I know where these guys from the companies kill themselves because they are so distressed with this. In fact, there isn't not enough company. And it was already said here this morning that when, I don't know if it was you, that now with the reconstruction of Ukraine, and there's a huge package of money also there, these big companies may allocate the workers and the efforts to that effort. So this is a challenge for us. Another challenge, already is also speaking by Filipa Roseta, is the bureaucratic ones. And I will put this in 2 levels. The first level is that we in Portugal do this amazing thing that is create rules over rules and over rules. And we demands over demands over demands. If you talk to other countries, if you want to present a project for making an application to this kind of plans, they don't have to go to each dwelling knowing who is the name of the person there, if pay the bills, if doesn't pay the bills, if he has any tax, any debt to the state, etc., etc., etc. So this is our institutions that overruled the programs, which is not done in the other countries. And I know most of the countries in Europe and how they work, and in most of the countries this is not meant. It doesn't mean that it's not so transparent, because it doesn't have to. You can do the assessment of the plans without knowing if the child, I'm exaggerating of course, but if the child has 3 or 4 years that lives in that house. So this is something that we've doing. And another bureaucratic process that we have, this is the second level, is on the municipalities level. So many times the projects need to be approved in the authorities, local authorities, because we have to remember that many of these projects can be done by other entities than the public. Okay, so it's also a difficulty. But this is not only a dark side of the thing. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's why the title of my presentation. So there's a huge opportunity. In Europe, there is a lot of social housing providers. In Portugal, the social housing providers are mainly concentrated in the municipalities. Also some in the cooperatives, but very few of them. So most in the municipalities, either managing by themselves or by municipal companies, with a very good job doing on site. But there is this social housing sector is essential, and it's very credible. There are social housing providers for more than 1.5 centuries now. So these are institutions around Europe that are very credible, very stable, so very recommended. And the social housing providers manage an amazing quantity of stock in Europe, and the members of Housing Europe, that, like I did say, they manage 25 million homes in Europe. So 11% of the total stock of homes are managed by these social housing providers. So, and they have, of course, experience not only in build, but also on social issues. They are efficient, they are community-driven, they have the capacity, and they have the will, and they have the notion of public service. For many years in Housing Europe, what we've been saying to the Commission is that if you really want a plan like the Green Deal or this kind of plans to be executed in a quick way, use the social housing providers. They are the ones who are best placed to make it efficient, direct, and give results in a very, very short time. So that's what we've been talking to the Commission for many years. Also, some Portuguese entities have been arguing this with the Commission. So give to the social housing providers the opportunity to show and to invest on these kind of plans. So thank you very much. What I would like to suggest is, because it's now time it's late, what I would like to suggest is that we have the afternoon session starting at 2:30 with Spain, Greece and France national plans. So I would suggest that we hear the 3 presentations right after the lunch, and then question and answers for the 4 of us. Okay, if you agree with that. So please be back at 2:30 sharp so that we can start without delays, okay? Thank you very much, and sorry for the initial delay.